There is a particular expression your dog makes that seems engineered almost too precisely to dissolve any resolve you had to say no. The eyebrows lift, the eyes widen and seem to grow larger, more luminous, more pleading. You feel something shift in your chest before you have consciously decided anything. For a long time, this was treated as a charming coincidence of dog facial anatomy. Then, a team of researchers conducted a detailed anatomical comparison between dogs and wolves and found something that reframes the entire expression as something closer to a specifically evolved communication tool, one that may not exist in the ancestral species dogs descended from at all. Welcome to Hidden Paw Signals. I want to begin the way I always do. Everything you hear on this channel comes from my own personal process of reading, studying, and trying to understand the published science behind dog behavior. I am not a veterinarian, researcher, or certified animal behaviorist. This is one person's learning journey through the world of canine cognition, shared with you because the findings genuinely changed how I see my own dog. It is educational content only and is not veterinary or medical advice. If you want to keep learning about what is really happening inside your dog's mind, subscribe now because that is exactly what this channel is for. The pivotal research here was published in 2019 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences by a team led by Julianne Kaminski, a comparative psychologist at the University of Portsmouth in the United Kingdom, who has spent much of her career studying dog cognition and dog-human communication. Working alongside anatomists and evolutionary biologists, Julianne Kaminski's team conducted a detailed dissection-based comparison of the facial musculature of dogs and gray wolves, the closest living relatives from which dogs descended through domestication. What they found was a specific muscle called the levator anguli oculi medialis, responsible for raising the inner eyebrow and producing the expression that makes a dog's eyes appear larger, rounder, and more infant-like, an expression colloquially known as puppy dog eyes. In dogs, this muscle was present, well developed, and used frequently. In wolves, the same muscle was either entirely absent or present only in a rudimentary, underdeveloped form that did not produce the same visible movement. This was a striking anatomical divergence between two otherwise closely related species, and it pointed toward a specific evolutionary change that occurred sometime during the domestication of dogs from their wolf ancestors. Julianne Kaminski and her colleagues proposed that this muscle developed or was preserved and elaborated specifically because it produced a facial expression that humans found compelling and were more likely to respond to with care, attention, and affection. The expression, by widening the eyes and making them appear larger relative to the face, closely resembles features humans typically associate with infants, a phenomenon evolutionary biologists refer to as the baby schema, first described by ethologist Konrad Lorenz, which describes a cluster of physical features, including large eyes, a rounded face, and a high forehead, that reliably trigger caregiving and protective responses in human observers across cultures. The hypothesis is that dogs whose facial anatomy allowed them to produce an expression closer to this baby schema were more successful across thousands of years of living alongside and depending on humans, at eliciting the attention and care that improved their chances of survival and reproduction. This is a striking example of what researchers call paedomorphism in domestication, the retention or evolution of infant-like features into adulthood, which has been documented across many domesticated species, but rarely with this level of anatomical specificity. The research did not stop at simple observation of the muscle's presence. Julianne Kaminsky's team also conducted behavioral experiments, observing how frequently dogs produced this expression when a human was paying attention to them, compared to when no human was present or attentive. The expression occurred significantly more often when dogs had an attentive human audience, suggesting that the behavior, not just the underlying anatomy, was specifically deployed in a socially directed way, rather than occurring as a random or purely reflexive facial movement. Before we continue, an important note. As always, what I share here is part of my personal reading of the published research and not professional advice. It is not veterinary guidance. If you notice sudden changes in your dog's facial movements, asymmetry in their expressions, or any signs of facial muscle weakness, please consult your local veterinarian, as these can sometimes indicate underlying neurological or health concerns that deserve direct professional evaluation rather than behavioral interpretation. There is a deeper layer to this finding that connects to a broader pattern in domestication research. The same general principle that traits that improve communication with and emotional appeal to humans were selectively favored across generations of dogs living alongside people has been documented in other physical and behavioral characteristics as well. What makes the eyebrow muscle finding particularly compelling is its precision. This is not a vague behavioral tendency or difficult-to-measure personality trait.
It is a specific, identifiable, physically dissectable muscle that differs in a measurable structural way between dogs and their closest wild relative, and whose primary functional output is a facial expression that triggers a well-documented caregiving response in the human brain. This research also intersects with what we know about human neurological response to the baby schema more broadly. Studies using brain imaging have shown that human viewers exposed to images featuring baby schema characteristics, including large, wide eyes, show increased activity in brain regions associated with reward and positive emotional processing, even when the images are of unfamiliar infants or, in some experimental designs, baby-faced animals. The puppy dog eyes expression appears to be tapping directly into this deep, largely automatic neurological response, one that likely predates dogs entirely and exists as part of the broader caregiving architecture of the human brain, repurposed by domestic dogs as a remarkably effective communication tool. What this means practically is worth sitting with. The expression you find almost impossible to resist is not, according to this research, a coincidental byproduct of dog facial structure. It is, in the most literal anatomical sense, a feature that appears to have been shaped by thousands of years of selection because it worked. Dogs whose ancestors could produce this expression more effectively were, generation after generation, more successful at securing the attention, resources, and care of the humans around them. Your dog did not learn to make this face through individual trial and error during their own lifetime, the way they might learn that sitting earns a treat. The capacity itself, the muscle that makes it possible, was inherited, refined across the entire evolutionary history of the species, specifically in relation to humans. There is something worth appreciating in how directly this connects an anatomical structure to a relationship outcome. Most adaptations in evolutionary biology are explained in terms of survival advantages related to environment, predation, or resource acquisition. This adaptation is explained almost entirely in terms of relationship and communication with a different species. The muscle exists, in the clearest sense the research can support, because of us. Because across the long history of dogs living alongside humans, the capacity to produce this specific, large-eyed, attention-grabbing expression measurably improved a dog's standing in the relationship that, for the domestic dog, has become the primary determinant of their survival and well-being. Knowing this does not make the expression any less effective. If anything, understanding the anatomical and evolutionary depth behind it adds a layer of appreciation rather than skepticism. Your dog is not manipulating you in the sense of conscious deception. They are using a tool refined over thousands of years of co-evolution that exists specifically because, across countless generations of dogs and humans, it built exactly the kind of connection that has made the relationship between our two species as deep and enduring as it is. As I always want to close with, everything shared here is part of my own learning process and is offered for education and reflection only. It is not professional veterinary or behavioral advice. If you have any concern about your dog's health or behavior, please consult a qualified local veterinarian who knows your individual dog. No video can replace that relationship. There is a final reflection worth offering here. Evolution rarely produces traits this specific without a clear and sustained selective pressure behind them. The fact that this exact muscle, with this exact functional output, differs so consistently between dogs and wolves tells us something about just how central the relationship with humans has been in shaping the physical form of the modern dog. It is easy to think of domestication primarily in terms of temperament, trainability, and behavior. This research is a reminder that the human-dog relationship reached deep enough over thousands of years to reshape the literal muscles of the face, producing an expression whose primary function appears to be speaking directly and specifically to us. There is a comparative detail from the 2019 research that adds further weight to the evolutionary argument. Juliane Kaminski and her colleagues also examined a small number of other canid species in their comparative anatomical work, and the muscle in question was consistently underdeveloped or absent outside of domestic dogs, reinforcing that this is not simply a general trait of the broader dog family, but something specifically associated with the domestication process itself. This kind of targeted anatomical divergence, present in the domesticated form but largely absent in the wild ancestral and closely related species, is considered strong evidence within evolutionary biology for a trait that was actively shaped by the specific pressures of life alongside humans. It is also worth understanding how this finding fits into a longer history of research into dog domestication more broadly, including the well-known Russian fox domestication experiments led by geneticist Dmitry Belyaev beginning in the 1950s, which demonstrated that selectively breeding wild foxes purely for tameness, without any deliberate selection for physical traits, produced a cascade of unintended physical changes across generations, including floppier ears, curlier tails, and more juvenile facial proportions. The eyebrow muscle finding in dogs fits naturally within this broader pattern, in which selection for traits that improved relationships with humans appears to have produced physical changes extending well beyond temperament alone, reshaping the very anatomy of the face, producing an expression whose primary function appears to be speaking directly and specifically to us. If this changed how you will look at that expression next time, share it with someone who has ever caved to puppy dog eyes within seconds. Leave a comment below. Does your dog use this look on you regularly, and does it work? I want to know.
Subscribe if you have not already, and I will see you on the next Hidden Paw Signals. The voice and visuals in this video were created using artificial intelligence. Thank you for watching Hidden Paw Signals.